John, Joe, thank you for doing this.
My pleasure, Jim.
Mary has explained it, and Carol Ann is looking for an oral history from a selected group of people that I think represent the community here with the staff. I wish we had more students show up than, I guess no students are coming. Is that correct? Current students or recent students?
I think there's a student coming today.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. And certainly the passmen and the priests. So I think it's a good representation.
Good.
And the interviews have been very interesting, very different, given the personality of the folks, but some real common threads that go through their experience here. And interestingly enough, just some background, the John Hand era that became clear to me with Basil
O'Sullivan. Gillian's uncle.
Yeah. And then more recently, I think the Vincentian influence and those of you who are diocesan. So, but I want to back up a little bit and talk about you for a minute and how you got to All Hallows, what brought you here, and what it is that, is that somebody at the door?
No, I think it's just this little...
What it is that brought you to All Hallows, and equally important, what's kept you here all these years.
Okay.
What are some of the influencers in your life here that have helped you as you've helped so many people, so many students that have gone through here? I do want to recognize too, the stories I've heard since I've been back about the work that you have done for staff as they've gone through this very difficult period in the last year. The support you've given people, not unlike the support you were giving as I experienced it when I was here. But I think a very important sense of support, real support for people that are grieving and at the same time very busy about taking care of students, ensuring that they finish. So, anyways, so tell me about you and how you got here.
Me and All Hallows. This goes back to 1967, I'm afraid.
I was just born.
Thanks very much. That makes me feel great.
Appreciate it.
1967, and very late in my secondary school career, I began to realise I had to listen to the still small voice that was talking priesthood to me and that I'd been studiously trying to ignore for a while. Just briefly, I suppose, once I began to think seriously that I had to at least try to get it out of my system, I was thinking of the alternatives would be my home base in Kerry, where I suppose the roots have always been pretty strong, and thinking the other end of the spectrum then, if you like, the foreign missions, and I didn't think of anything in between at that stage really. Kerry was more than well supplied with priests at that time, so I decided there wasn't much of a mission to, I suppose, to be taken on there. So I was thinking in terms of foreign missions. And a priest who was chaplain in the Christian Brothers School in Tralee, where I was attending at that time, said, there is another tradition of mission from Ireland, and it's somewhere in between those two alternatives. And he said it's about ministering in places where Irish people have gone in large numbers, and he mentioned Britain and America, Australia, and all of that. And straight away I realised I'm kind of a middle of the road kind of a person, I think, basically. So give me two extremes and a choice in between, and I'll usually go for the in between. And so I think I knew a few people who had gone to Thurles Seminary, including a cousin of mine, John Ahern. And I said that didn't sound too bad, and to go for a diocese in England. Immigration was still a very big issue, I suppose, in rural Ireland, rural Kerry at that time, and I that was probably part of it as well. I'd been so used to seeing these sad little ceremonies at the railway station in Tralee when I'd be coming or going myself from school, of the farewells, and wondering what was happening to still the very large numbers of young people who were heading off for Birmingham and London and Manchester and Liverpool and all these places. So I think,
jobs that they were
yes, the very, very large scale immigration at that time. So it was as vague as that, I think, initially. I hoped to go to the seminary nearest home, which was Thurles, but the wise old counsellor I had, Pat McCarthy, said, no, he said, I think now All Hallows would be the place for you. I'd never heard of All Hallows. I resisted. It was in Dublin. It had a fancy name. None of that was appealing to me. So anyway, I ended up in All Hallows, September 1967, and I certainly blessed the day, because I never regretted that. So I took on to Salford Diocese then in England, simply because I knew the name of that diocese, and I was more attracted, I think, all right, to the north of England than to the London scene. And again, I've no regrets about that, even though I ended up only spending 15 years altogether in England, and 7 of them working in that diocese of Salford, because I was seconded to another mission in England, working with the Catholic Missionary Society in 1981. Work that was doing parish mission work around England, Scotland, Wales. Worked in that for about 7 years, and that's when Kevin Rafferty was on a recruiting campaign to get some diocesan priests to help out with the programs that he was beginning to develop here in All Hallows at the time, particularly the lay ministry program, as it was called then, and opening up the theology programs to wider audiences than just seminarians.
There was a tradition, I understand, or an expectation back while I was a seminary and the Vincentians were running it, that there had to be 2 diocesan priests on staff. I just learned that from...
That's interesting. I think All Hallows had a similar tradition. There was nearly always a representative from Meath Diocese, I suppose, continuing the connection with John Hand, the founder of the college, and Kerry Diocese generally had somebody here on the staff as well.
So was Father Rafferty continuing that tradition of diocesan priests as well as Vincentian priests?
Yeah, I would. Well, there was that, but of course there was also the factor, I suppose, that the options were getting limited within the Vincentians as well. At that time, numbers were dwindling. They weren't having too many new recruits, and but also I think he knew. I'd kept in touch with All Hallows, even after ordination, while I was working in England, and I think Kevin knew something of the work that we had been doing. He had worked in England for a long time himself, and he knew the kind of work that we were doing in the Catholic Missionary Society, which was really, I suppose, trying to, rather than just giving parish missions, which was traditionally what the Catholic Missionary Society did, it was more working with teams and parishes, kind of alerting them to their mission and kind of the programs that went with that. And I think he saw that there should be a good fit between the experience we had gained on that and what he was trying to put in place here around expanding the notion of mission and ministry.
Yeah. So was he intending that the kind of missionary work that you had been doing and the kind of orientation that you had, that he was purposeful, I guess, about you fitting in with what was that sense of Vincentian values and educating students to be active in society and making change part of their...
I think so.
Is that too much of a...
Well, Kevin had been talking to priests in the Dublin area here, about the future of All Hallows. It was quite clear, the writing was on the wall in terms of the future of the seminary in All Hallows. The graph was going down quite steeply. And Kevin had been, posing the question to all of us, like, the work that has been traditionally done by the by priests and sisters and that won't be doing it in the future. Well, the work still needs to be done. So obviously we need to be anticipating that. He was, I suppose, ahead of his time on that. But he did have a number of I suppose priests particularly, that he was consulting in Dublin, who would have been supporting him in the plans that he was formulating around that. And Kevin was the kind of person who, like, if he kind of liked the sound of what you were doing, he wasn't too interested in the details or in job descriptions or stuff like that. He said, come on board, take a look, come down this road with us for a while. That was Kevin's kind of language. He could live with a lot of uncertainty. And like Kevin had been talking to me over a year or 2 years before I came to All Hallows, and I never saw a job description for what I might be doing there. I still haven't. You know, Aidan Galvin, a colleague of mine here, when I was saying to him about this, look, I said, I'm supposed to be starting in All Hallows in September, and I haven't seen nothing. You know, this was the summer. I've seen nothing about what I'll be doing. And he said, don't worry. He said, one of these days, he said, Kevin Rafferty will invite you for a walk around the circle there, and you'll see your future pass before you. And as usual, Aidan was bang on the nail with that. That's exactly how it happened. But so what I did then, I suppose, was a natural fit in terms of what I'd been doing in England. Kevin asked me to initially to link up with Bob Whiteside on what we call the lay ministry program at that time. And then I took over directing that program, I think for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something. Absolutely loved it. When I look back on my time in All Hallows, it's probably the one I look back to with most satisfaction.
Great. When I talked to Mark Noonan yesterday morning, he talked about Kevin Rafferty's vision for All Hallows coming out of the seminary era, and he was clear it was Kevin's vision, which I found interesting because of Mark Noonan's role at the time as dean. But I understand that Kevin Rafferty was off someplace and had this epiphany about what the college should look like and do. But I'm curious about, when I look at the mission statement now and what I understand had been there for a number of years, and when I hear that Kevin Rafferty was very purposeful in what he wanted the college to be, where does this mission statement now line up with what Kevin was looking for? And then you're coming on board, and was he that purposeful in who he was hiring at the time to meet his expectations, and that not so much, moving the college forward financially, but moving it to educate young people or young adults in ways that they're going to be influential? Yeah.
I suppose the way I see what was happening in Kevin's era, it wasn't a kind of an isolated thing, I often think if I was writing the story of my experience of All Hallows, because I've experienced All Hallows under 5 different presidents, and there's only been 13 in the whole story of the place.
It's all your fault.
There were the 5. Tom Fagan was president when I came in here, and Tom was just, very much in the mould of if I can say, the traditional presidents of All Hallows up to then. The college was seemed to be he focused exclusively on All Hallows College and continuing its mission, sending pioneering priests out to these missions, and he did a very, very good job on that. Great hospitality, welcome, lived for the college. But Second Vatican Council came then, and that kind of model, it was a highly clerical kind of a model, really, I suppose. And it just didn't fit with the theology of mission and ministry, and that was emerging from the Second Vatican Council. And I think, I'm coming to Kevin Rafferty, but I think the person we had in between Tom Fagan and Kevin Rafferty, Tom Lane, really laid the foundations for most of what happened since that era, in the sense that we'd often have talk about Tom, maybe he wasn't... He would never have claimed to have been among the most original thinkers theologically or in that field during his time, but he was a wonderful scholar and a wonderful synthesizer of the best that was coming from from the Second Vatican Council, and even from the theological schools that had influenced the council and all of that. And he was introducing us to that stuff, back in the late 60s, early 70s, when it was coming hot off the press kind of from Rome. So I think that's a very important, I think Tom was president maybe for 12 years. So I don't think Kevin Rafferty could have done what he did, that visionary stuff, if those foundations hadn't been laid. Okay. So it was into that context, seminary numbers falling, Tom Lane having laid good solid theological foundations for ministry, for mission, for Eucharist, all of those things. And I think Kevin Rafferty could see that within that there was the possibility of opening out to a wider audience, that there was no reason why this kind of formation shouldn't feed the dream he had as well of a more inclusive understanding of ministry and of mission. Okay. And he built on that, I'd say, very much. Yeah. So then he chose people, I suppose, that he knew would share that kind of vision, that were committed to the vision of the Second Vatican Council.
So where does the elements of the current mission, which I think have been here for a while as I understand it, how did those come to the forefront of this education for purpose, and purpose being, influencers in society?
Yeah. I suppose if I was trying to write the story of All Hallows in terms of the leadership and how that translated into policies under the five presidents that I had known here, I'd use the phrase maybe "come at the hour, come at the person." Okay. Talk about what Tom Fagan did, I think was right and proper for its time in terms of the All Hallows tradition. Tom Lane certainly moved it on very significantly in terms of theological foundations, and that Kevin Rafferty, yes, very visionary, expanding, could live with a lot of uncertainty. And I think possibly at the end of that then it needed a bit of anchoring, You can't live forever with all the balls in the air, which was one of Kevin Rafferty's favourite metaphors. And I think under Mark Noonan's leadership then, there was a kind of a deliberate decision and planning to anchor the academic work and the theological work of All Hallows, more securely, and hence the negotiations initially with Maynooth about getting properly accredited degrees and qualifications for clerical students and lay students, and then going on to the National Council of Educational Awards, the national accrediting body, and then, of course, the opportunity of linking with our local Northside Dublin University, Dublin City University, and Mark was very much part of leading us into that area. And I suppose for the first time then we had to take serious the language of strategic planning. And so I think the planning that we had to do about accrediting our degrees with Dublin City University and the NCEA before that was the thing really that helped us to pull all those strands together, that we were talking about there under the Kevin Rafferty, and to focus them and, as I say, anchor them more securely.
I think that's really a very important chronology or path to understand from the time John Hand through the various presidents, and how the sequencing of the development of All Hallows to today has happened, and the various focuses of each of the presidents, but at the same time how the following president continued to build on the predecessor.
And I suppose just to complete the picture from my angle, when Pat McDevitt came on board then, I think it didn't take Pat long to realise that there was a price tag on all of this that we had been doing, expanding, and that it needed development. We needed to find ways of increasing student numbers again and of increasing revenue, and I think he made a very bold bid at doing that. I have great respect for the effort and the plans that he was trying to put in place for that. And we've often used the phrase, it was maybe too late in the day to stop the downturn in terms of the finances. And the more I see what has been happening on the campus now since the negotiations with DCU, I have a kind of certain peace about what's happening, because the way DCU talked about the millions that it's going to take to bring this campus up to what they would consider basic requirements for a third level campus. Yeah. I don't think all the fundraising in the world that we could possibly put in place would have bridged that gap for us.
Well, there are huge areas that needed investment. The library, and, I think the technical support, the quality of some of the classrooms, and things like that. And I think faculty salaries, more permanent contracts and things. But what I find interesting is the trajectory from the seminary days forward of the, I think, as you referred to it, I think the clarification of mission, and even more so labeling what the academic experience was to be about, and the outcomes that happened, the accreditation that happened under Mark Noonan, positioning it for a very viable academic institution at third level. So that trajectory up, and then this unfortunate financial trajectory down, as the costs increased to make it a very viable third level, and then the decline in the number of religious that we're teaching here, or clerical staff that we're teaching, which just increased the salary costs.
And the serious downturn in the economy,
right? And then the impact of
hit
the economy,
the trust fund very much.
So it was almost a perfect storm.
I'm afraid so.
Was unfortunate, and probably not reversible by then. But I think what was remarkable, and this is what I want to find out from you why you stayed here, was the commitment of staff during all those years and the turmoil, and what I came to respect of the commitment of staff and the sacrifices that staff made. So tell me, why did you stay in the midst of all of that when you could have gone back to good old England?
In 1981 I was, 1988, 89, I was seconded from my diocese. The bishop there at the time, Patrick Kelly, I think would have been, he had been rector of a seminary himself in England, so I think he was sympathetic to Kevin Rafferty's difficulties as president in All Hallows of getting staff for a seminary at that time. So he was quite encouraging about my taking the offer rather than the other possibility which I had been considering at the time was going on. Our diocese also had a mission to Peru at that time, and I would have liked to have gone on that. Anyway, I opted to come to All Hallows for 5 years, and I really thought that as the outside limit for 5 years. And the 5 years came, and Kevin Rafferty, there might be might need a little extension to that for a while, and it went on like that, and eventually the diocese even stopped reminding me that it just became 5-year cycles after that, and 27 years later, God forgive me, I'm still here, and and hope my most recent contact with the diocese was just to negotiate an arrangement that would leave me free to be based here in Dublin and continuing in some capacity, part-time, voluntary capacity, whatever way it will be, to continue with the transition work in All Hallows, and maybe at least some kind of moral support for the various programs and initiatives that have migrated from All Hallows to other institutes around. I'm very happy to be part of that, and then continue to work in the Dublin area in parish work and pastoral ministry of whatever kind. So there's something, I suppose, your question was what kept me here. A friend of mine used to use the phrase, the place can get into you. John Moriarty used to say that, a place can get into you. And I think maybe even before I came back on the staff, because apart from the 27 years, I'm here on the staff. I was 7 years as a student as well, so that's 34 years, and I'm 68 next birthday. So it is a long spell, and I think the place has got into me. I'm a great believer in the mission and in the whole ethos of the place, that kind of the Vincentian charism that's, I think, is embedded in the very bricks and mortar of the campus. And I think whatever transitions we're going through now, please God, a lot of that will survive. Yeah. And I'm very happy still. I see a real sense of mission in facilitating that in any way I can.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right. I think the importance of sustaining the identity and ethos in some way as a transition now to DCU. The corridor is an important part of that.
Yes.
And the trust is as well.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things as I've been back here is how do you create that sense of affinity and community that the past men have? How do you create it with the graduates, lay graduates of the college?
Yeah.
Because just like so many schools have strong alumni associations and alumni groups, I think there needs to be something very proactive to connect past students to feel the same about the college.
And the new cycle, I think it will have to be set aside with small steps initially, maybe, but then so did John Hand start with a very small step with his one student coming up the drive in his pony and trap. For Michael Rogers down at Glendalough, when he's doing his tours around the site and that, he often ends with the thing when people refer to the ruins that are down there. Michael will often raise his eyebrows and say, ruins or foundations. And a lot is about the way you look at something like that. I mean, it's natural, I suppose, for the past men coming back to think of this as the last hurrah. Mind you, they did that before in 1992 when the seminary came to an end, and 3,000 students have gone through the place, 3,000 accredited students since that wake for All Hallows. Now, I know this is different, the campus is sold and all of that, but it's different, but I don't think we need to think that the mission is finished. Right. The college will have to cease operating, but I don't think the All Hallows mission will cease operating.
You've had a great impact on so many students as they've gone through here. Are there any favorite stories you have of, I guess, your influence, but I think those that maybe you saw coming in kind of bewildered by it all and ending up in a spectacular kind of, or maybe not so spectacular way, but a different person having left here.
Yeah, there's so many faces could come to mind. A lovely traveller girl we had here, a woman, I should say, Kathleen McDonough, at a time, it was in the early 1990s, I suppose, when there'd be a very small proportion of travellers even attending primary school and very, very few attending secondary school. Kathleen had managed, through the kind of access programs we had, to get on our BA program, and she was just a delightful presence in the place, and she had a good theological mind herself, and she went on later to do a master's degree in UL and that. So I would think of Kathleen's. We maintained a long friendship through that.
Anyways, what else would you like to share before this crowd gives you a standing ovation?
Lots of people, I suppose, quote Kevin Condon in regard to when he was the historian of the man who wrote the history of the college, at least the first volume, and unfortunately it was taken from us before he could continue it. But I always remember, I think that among the last recorded words of Kevin when he was speaking, because he died while he was on a tour of past students in the United States, and he had been at a gathering of All Hallows students in Florida, I think, and the final speech he gave, I think the final recorded words, he said, I know I'm supposed to be talking to you about fundraising and all that kind of stuff. He said, I'm not very good at that kind of stuff. He said, I don't know how All Hallows the finances will work out, but All Hallows must go on. All Hallows mission must go on. And I suppose I place myself in that
Good.
camp.
Thanks, John Joe.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.